today we have Britton and Michelle Smith joining us. And so I'm really excited. So I met Britton and Michelle about a year and a half ago. Well,
Yeah, probably a year and a half ago. Yeah.
year and a half ago. They are crazy. And they did a RV trip around the USA with their three boys. And they rolled into Lubbock. And the one thing I have to give them full credit on is they had a Chamber of Commerce day when we were here. We had a full-on haboob. If you don't know what a haboob is, uh, think in the movies in the Middle East and Egypt, and you see in these movies where like a sandstorm blows in. That's an actual real thing, and we get it here in Lubbock. And one of the days that they were here, it's like 60-mile-an-hour winds, and they're in their RV. I mean, it's crazy. So I have to say, I have to give them full credit that they experienced all that Lubbock had for them, and it was glorious. And no, but really, I just really enjoyed my time with them. I've developed a friendship with them, and I wanted y'all to hear from them about their journey with disciple making, and they've been doing this for a little while. So I wanted to have y'all hear them together speak of their journey. So Britton, Michelle, welcome. Glad to have you guys. Anything you want to add about the greatness of Lubbock that I didn't
Yeah,
share?
I'll just say this about my boys. We were traveling through Texas, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, this is West Texas. You guys are going to West Texas? Oh man, they're different out there. They're different." And we got to West Texas, Lubbock. It was different, and my kids said, "I think we'd be okay if we never go back to Lubbock." Nothing against you, but they do talk about the incredible brisket we had and the
Banana pudding.
banana pudding. Look at that, making
Oh,
science.
amazing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was celebrating. Wow.
The food was worthwhile, but they just said that haboob was. Yeah, they still talk about it.
Yeah. I think everybody should experience a haboob once in their life, and that's like I say that, and everybody's like, "That's not a real thing." Go Google it. I promise your safe filters will be okay. Just spell it correctly. So, so yeah, tell us before we talk about your background. Tell us about that journey that y'all did whenever y'all came to see us. How many states did y'all go see, and how many months were y'all on the road?
Yeah, we were on the road for 7.5 months. We are from West Michigan. Jesus told us to sell our house in 2022, and so why not then, instead of buying another house, just get a trailer and a truck and then tour the country. So we did that for 7.5 months. We had 26 states, one big loop around the United States, and we connected with people that we had a relationship with. We had connected people in the DMM world, people that we work with in the DMM world, and hit 21 national parks as well along the way. And no one murdered each other, and that was probably the biggest thing. We have three boys. They're 14 now. They're 14, 12, and 9, and so they were in like a little bunk room in the back, and they didn't murder each other. So that's what we praise the Lord for.
That's a parenting win in and of itself.
I would say so, right? I mean,
I hopefully, I don't know if I'm really smirking and frozen on my screen, so I don't know if that's
awesome program. We like that. It's good.
I don't know what's going on there. All right, so tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us like how long you've been married, kids, where you live, what you do. Kind of just catch us up to date on who are Britton and Michelle.
I mean, I think you already said in Southwest Michigan. I grew up in the Chicagoland area. Britton grew up kind of in the area where we currently are. We met in college and got married about a year out of college. And so this summer we will have been married for 19 years. As you mentioned, three boys who are 14, 12, and 9. And I have been homeschooling them since 2020. So I was already homeschooling them when we decided to sell our house and go on the road. So that was a big reason why we were able to just peace out and travel for an unidentified amount of time when we started. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a pastor. We may get into this as much as you want. I was a pastor for about 16 years, and in 2021 stepped away from that. And currently, I coach. We do a lot of it together. We coach and train predominantly pastors, a lot of ministry leaders to make the transition from the prevailing model of the church into pioneering disciple making movements, and just all the navigating all the nuts and bolts and unique challenges that pastors face in making that journey that's a little different than non-pastors. And so that's what we do with most of the hours of our day and wrangle three boys. Now we're just gonna sit here awkwardly. Apparently, he's talking to the wall. So that's a little. I mean, I knew he's a crazy, but that's kind of like next level crazy.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, guys. My daughter's here. Just one second. Someone came to the door. I'm so sorry. Hold
You
on
do
one
it. We'll
second.
just keep talking. You're fine.
Yeah.
We'll
Hey,
keep
no,
talking.
Britton, tell them about Pastor to Pioneer. Tell them a little bit about what you're doing and your journey as a pastor.
Yeah, sounds good. This gets into how we got into DMM. I was a pastor of a church that was growing, and in the eyes of the church world, people say, "This is amazing, it's thriving." And in my heart, I'm like, "There's more to it than this. There's got to be more to it than this. Something's missing." And a friend of mine who was another pastor in town, we just we're asking the question, "Are we making disciples?" And the answer was no. We weren't making disciples. I could draw a crowd and people. God, I'm not saying God wasn't moving. God was totally moving. God was doing amazing things, but like it was really dependent upon me, and I knew if I stepped out of that or I wasn't there, like it would collapse. And I'm not trying to say like I'm an amazing person or something like that. Just the way that the system was set up, it was really dependent upon me, and we weren't making disciples. And so um, we started then to figuring out how to do this. We just learned from the church in China. They were meeting at homes, so we started doing house church. Like this is it. But we didn't know what we were doing. Made a lot of mistakes. Ended up with 60 people in the living room. Finally got connected with people that were in the DMM world that knew what they were doing and trained us. And so I began this this 8-year journey or 10-year journey. That was back in 2012, 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. I figured out how to do this as a pastor, how to integrate this in my church and how to do it outside of the church. And so when we stepped away in 2021, we really stepped into doing this with pastors because pastors face they're asking different questions than other people. You have to think about how do you step away from the thing that pays the bills? What am I going to do for finances? What am I going to do? This is my identity. This is what I went to school for. Navigating the grief and loss of losing relationships and friendships and notoriety and status in the community and just all of these questions. They're asking them more theological questions. And so what we do with Pastor Pioneer is we help train and coach pastors in paradigm shifts and theological shifts that we find helpful to make this journey so you don't bring the baggage of the institution into your living room. We help walk through the nuts and bolts of how to make the transition well, and that can take months or years. Some people it takes years. And one of the things, and we'll probably get into it today in like our story, one of the things we've been stepping more into is the relational and emotional skills and connection specifically between husband and wife needed to make this transition. Because what ends up happening, and this was our journey, is you're not on the same page. And what it gets exposed when you can't hide behind ministry anymore is the issues in your own home and your own marriage and your own family that need to be navigated. And so we help coach and train and kind of structure those conversations to have those conversations so that when you start pioneering, you're pioneering together, you're pioneering as a family, you're pioneering from a place of health, rather than just bringing all the junk that you were hiding in the institution now into the living room. So we're making it up as we go along, but we've been doing this now for 3 years and uh, having fun doing it and getting to do more of it together, which is uh, honestly a gift from the Lord.
Amen. Amen. Sorry, I had to run, but I'm back. I'm good.
No, you're good, man. You're good.
So that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. So, and I wanted to hear from each of your perspective because I would assume they were different places because Britton, as a pastor, when you start hearing about DMM, what were the things that were exciting and maybe even scary for you? And then Michelle, I'm sure you started hearing, at least initially, secondhand, about DMM. what was exciting and scary for each of you as y'all started hearing and learning about DMM?
But go.
I think for me, the exciting thing was we could empower people to follow Jesus that wasn't dependent upon me. And I think just the multiplicative potential that it had to reach a community and beyond that wasn't dependent on us deciding, do we go to 2 services or not? Do we then go to 3 services or not? This thing is a beast I got to feed the machine even more and more and more as we grow. That feels terrible to me. So I think I just saw the potential of what this could do in simple, reproducible ways that had just huge potential.
Yeah, I think for me, typically I would hear about the ideas and things he's wrestling with, and it didn't always translate to affecting me or the family right away. So I don't know that I was like scared or nervous about it initially. I think I just had questions of, okay, what is this going to look like, and how is it going to impact our home and our family as we start stepping into it?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of being a pastor's wife, right? Like you're always hearing the different things and processing through that. So who was kind of initially helping you start on this journey? How were you exposed to disciple making and things like that? Who were people that were kind of influential in that journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. When my friend Neil and I were just starting out, just making this stuff up in his living room, we got connected with some folks with Big Life who were doing this around the world, and just brought us into relationship, honestly, to encourage us. And those guys were like, "Hey, we're gonna go do a training with Curtis Sargent down in Alabama. Do you wanna go with us?" And so it was really Curtis Sargent and a lot of his training coaching that was initially a huge catalyst for us in this work.
Mm-hmm. What year was that, Britton, that y'all did that?
I think it was like 2013, 2014 ish, in that ballpark. Probably 2014, I think, maybe in that ballpark.
So you got training and then you right away quit your job and you went
Yeah,
full bore with this, right? Isn't that so? Is that the
yeah,
timeline?
that's exactly. Not quite. I think I was trying to figure out how do I implement this in my church. Like we're doing this on the side. Like I think we just thought we knew that's the one thing we knew even before we got connected with Curtis. We have to start living this. We have to figure this out by doing it. And maybe that's just part of our personalities. Like we just got to try it, get our hands dirty.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing that on the side, but then I was so convicted because some of the DMM, I didn't know what DMM was really at that point in time. Curtis gave language and tools and framework that just made sense. I'm like, oh, that's why I feel what I feel. Okay. So I was trying to figure out how to implement this in my church. So I was trying to train people how to be the church in simple ways, trying to train people how to make disciples, make disciples. But the reality is I mean, they didn't have a framework for it. And I don't know, I had a full framework for it. So I think it just got interpreted as a program. Oh, this is your small group program. This is your Bible study. Oh, finally, you're offering things for us to do that we've been asking for so long. Thanks, Britton. And so um, it ended up being a 10-year
Yeah.
10-year journey before it was all said and done. No, 8 years before I stepped away, actually. And I would say 3 years of slowly trying to figure it out, and then 5 years of really pressing hard into it in the church. And we can get into that, but it led up to COVID, and ended up in a bunch of people leaving, church split, church shrunk by like 90%. So if you want to know how to shrink a church, we can talk offline on how to do that.
I have some thoughts on that as well. So,
yeah, right, exactly.
So you get trained 2013, you're trying it out. There's, different levels of this, but they're usually, what was your process? Was this a continual process of like getting into DMM, or was there a certain turning point that happened that you kind of were like, hey, I think this is where this is at? And then were there any mistakes that you made in that process, things you'd like to change?
No mistakes that come to mind. Pretty much nailed it from the beginning.
Perfect.
I think when I got trained by Curtis, again, this will go into our story. Like that was without Michelle. So much of the beginning part was without Michelle. I like brought her along, and a lot of this comes to the mentality of as a pastor. Ministry's my job, ministry's my thing, and that's my family's over here. It's separate. And so I was just doing this as part of my job, as part of ministry, and I was then dragging my family along in this. It's just like, this is what we're gonna do. Let's go. And that doesn't work real well. But for me, it was just like immediately I knew this was the direction. The part that took me a long time to figure out was what role does my church play in this or not? Is this conviction for me or is this conviction for the whole church? Is this the direction for me or the whole church? And I just kept taking steps, and it seemed like it was going to be for my whole church, and it ended up, I guess, not really being in the end. But it was early. I mean, early knowing this is the direction we need to go. I just spent a lot of time figuring out what we need to do with the other entity that was involved. And so I think that's what it was for us as a family then is we started living it and all along with the whole time. And so when we ended up leaving the church, my kids were like, well, we're still meeting in the house, right? Yeah, of course. All right, we're good. We're good. That had become the part of our life. And so it was something I think we all were bought into and all want to be a part of as a family. I think we did make a lot of mistakes, and I'll let Michelle share some of those that I made first. Because I'm sure we made some together, but mostly it was me making mistakes. It was predominantly what it was. It was my mistakes.
I mean, yes, there were definitely things that were challenging. I think Britton already alluded to it was very true that in the beginning it was his thing. It was very much a part of his job, and it was very much intertwined with his job as a pastor. So it was very connected to the church that we were a part of. I think when we first started meeting, in someone else's home that eventually grew to be like 60 people in a living room, our kids were very little. In fact, our third one wasn't even born yet when we started that process. And so we were meeting in the evening because Britton was still a pastor, so our Sunday mornings were spoken for, and we were meeting in the evening, and it was our kids' bedtime. So I was hauling sleeping bags, all of their pajamas and diapers and all the things, and I was trying to put them to bed in sleeping bags on the floor in someone else's home, which meant that I was missing out on most of what was happening. And I was asking these questions of like, what is the point? Why are we doing this? The 3/4 of our family are not participating in this. It feels like we're just showing up to say that we agree with what we're doing. And in principle, I didn't disagree with what we were doing. It's just that it wasn't working for our family. And those were not conversations that Britton and I could have that would go well at that point in time.
I think the reason why they wouldn't go well is because I saw this. I was so gung-ho about the vision of DMM that I saw any concern she would bring up and how it was negatively impacting my family. I felt like I had to choose between her or Jesus, rather than being humble enough to say, hey, maybe we should see Jesus together and ask him how he wants us to live this out. And to then take into consideration the impact this is having on my family and go from there. And so I had to change my mindset of she's not against me or against the vision God's given us, but to really seek him for clarity on what the vision is and have more grace and nuance for how to live it out, I think was a huge issue. I think one of the other mistakes we made was my family was not the starting point for this. And my family was something just I was dragging along. And later on, someone said to me, and it really clicked finally after many, many years, it was like, Britton, you cannot bypass your family to model family, spiritual family for other people. And when they said it, I was like, oh, you're right. And we had to reset things back to this being in the simplicity of this starts in our home. This starts with us. And then we can reproduce maybe from there. But it has to be our family getting on the same page. And so we had to, it's easy to scale back. We then, after a year, me stopped away from being a pastor. That's when we went on the road. So for 8 months, it was just our family. And it's pretty wild to reset things when it's just your family in a 40-foot trailer. And then a year living in my mom's basement, so like you got a lot of time just to reset things as a family. But I think that's what some of the mistakes we made was we weren't starting with just our family. And I was saying, are we on the same page? Are we seeking Jesus together? It was me blazing ahead and dragging my family along, saying, "This is God's will for us. Trust me. Let's go." And they were like, "Okay, I'm sure it is." And they were not. It just didn't go well. Didn't go well.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about your kids more. So like, um, how are they involved in the process now? What does it look like having kids and trying to make disciples with you've had young kids and now you're starting to have older kids, right? So older boys. So
Yeah, I would say, obviously they were exposed to it early. And after, this meeting in one house grew to a size that was no longer manageable. At that point, we said, okay, maybe we'll meet in our own home, one, so we can put our kids to bed in their own beds and I can participate. But then we can kind of branch out and have some, split into other groups. And so we began doing that. And I think it was just a lot of trial and error. I think we believed that we wanted our kids to be involved, but I think we had to figure out what that looked like. And so we experimented with them playing downstairs in the basement for part of the time and being with us for part of the time. We experimented with them coloring or playing with a quiet toy while we would read scripture before they could read. So I think we played with a lot of different ways of involving them, and eventually over time it got to the point where they knew that they were expected, not in a harsh way, but expected to be part of what we were doing, to participate. We wanted to hear from them. We wanted them to ask questions. We wanted them to, as they grew, to be able to read, to help read the scripture out loud, to pick some of the songs that we were singing. But it just took time to get to a place where they knew that we wanted them to participate and that we truly empowered them to be part of and to shape the gathering. And I would say the people that were meeting with us were really great about that, because sometimes our kids were the only kids. Other times there were other kids. And I think we found that our kids actually engaged better when there were other kids around rather than when it was just them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but those are a few of the things that we played around with.
I think one of the biggest shifts that we made was modeling for our kids a lifestyle of listening and obeying Jesus. And so that meant in really practical ways. We were including our kids in major family decisions. So we were including them in the major family decisions of selling our house, of buying a truck, of buying a trailer, where we would together ask, Jesus, what do you want to say to us about this? Jesus, is it the truck that you have for us? Jesus, is it the trailer? Jesus, like we were modeling that for our kids. And then we'd say, what's Jesus saying to you? What's Jesus saying to you? What's Jesus saying to you? To model, like, if you follow Jesus, that's not like when you turn 18, now all of a sudden you can hear God's voice and you can do what he says. This is how we live our life. We live our lives surrendered to Jesus. We live our life asking him what to do. We live our life responding accordingly and doing what he says. And so when we're making decisions, that's just what we do. When we've looked at a bazillion homes, we pray, God, is this the house you have for us? No. We're tired of hearing no. But I think that's so much of it with our kids. If it goes back to starting with the simplicity of your own home, of if this is how we live our lives. We ask Jesus and we do what he says, whether it's when we're gathering together with others or whether we're just living our life as a family. So now that's our kids are saying, hey, Jesus told me to do this, and Jesus said to do this. Jesus, and they're just learning a life of walking in step with the Spirit because we've tried to do that together as a family. So our kids are incredible. Like we just they're amazing kids. They're really amazing kids. We just love being with them.
I love that too, because that is so much about your living life together. And this is what we do. It's not a program that we're a part of, right? That's just totally different. So let's just continue to walk through, because y'all have talked about some of the challenges, but in this journey, what were some of the biggest challenges y'all had, both personally, in your marriage, in just raising kids in this? What were some challenges? We're going to get to Joy's here in a second. But what were the challenges first?
Hmm.
There was a lot. You want me to go? I can
Yeah.
share. I think one of the biggest ones we realized was how much I hid behind ministry to not address the things going on in my own home. My family got the leftovers. And at one point, when everything kind of blew up for us in 2021, right before we stepped away from the church, Michelle said, she said, our ministry has always been a part of our marriage. It's like a sister wife in our marriage. It's always present. And in fact, it usually got the top priority in my relationship. It was my first love, and then Michelle was down the list somewhere. She was one of them, but she was further down the list. And I think that was a tough realization of how much I prioritized impact or ministry or whatever it may be at the expense of my marriage and the expense of my family. And with that, then realizing I didn't know how to have a heart to heart connection with my wife. For me, love was serving her. My love was doing things for her. And, but, Jesus talks about that. You can do all these things outwardly. You can say these things, honor him with your lips, but your heart being far from him. And I think it's the same thing with spouse. Like my heart was not heart to heart connected. It was doing the right external things, but not this heart connection. And so we had to learn like how to connect heart to heart. I had to learn even like recognizing emotions because I'd communicated a logical head level, she'd communicated a heart level, and we totally miss each other. And so we're talking about all these details of like, okay, are we going to step away from the church or not? We're going to pursue just DMM full time. What does this look like? And I'm thinking strategy and details, and she's trying to express the hurt and the concern of her heart, and we just totally missed each other. And so I think that was a huge challenge, like learning to to recognize and be humble enough to say, like, I've been a pastor for a long time and I suck at connecting with my wife. And that's a hard realization because people look to you as the model for so many things that I had no business being the model for, I think, in a lot of areas.
Mhm.
What are some other ones?
I mean, I think there's just challenges that inherently are part of being a pastor or a pastor's wife or really any, leadership position. Um, I think it was just really isolating and it was really lonely. I didn't feel like I could go to people to ask for help or to even speak honestly about how ministry was impacting us and our marriage and our family. Um, and in fact, I tried to do that one time with somebody that I thought was safe, and she went home and told her husband, and her husband and came and reamed him out. And like that was not support at all. So um, I think there was just a huge sense of loneliness and isolation um, that ministry was a huge contributing factor to just that being the reality for us. So that's one of the big ones that comes to mind for me. But obviously, I think I knew deep in my heart that this was not the way that things should be, but I didn't know how to go about identifying that. I didn't feel like the things I tried to express to Britton made sense to him, and I didn't know how to combat that because again, this was our livelihood, it was his job, it was our community, it was our whole life. And so I felt like I just looked like a negative Nancy bringing up concerns, but at the end of the day there was this just deep sense for me that this is not the way that Jesus intended us to live in relationship to one another.
I think personally, one of the challenges too for me, just stepping away from being a pastor, was you don't realize how much pride or like what fuels you of you having a voice with people. You feel like I have an impact. And my world shrunk, just shrunk tremendously from hundreds of people down to for a season, it was really just my family and then a few others I was working with, right? And so, like, that exposes a lot of arrogance and pride that was in my own heart that I didn't realize was there until it was all stripped away. And I just realized how much I idolized impact and having a voice and rallying people to a cause and realizing I think placing a lot more emphasis on my ability to do that than trusting the Spirit's work in people's lives. So there's many more, but those are a few to get you
Man.
started on some challenges.
I appreciate y'all sharing that. I think that's very true. And I know I resonate with that part of that story so much, and me and my wife. And I think anybody that has gone on this journey, I've known nobody that has done disciple making that it hasn't come at a cost.
Yeah.
And a lot of that cost is relationally. And it also comes at a cost of going, what do I really want? Do I really want to see God's kingdom come, or is this
Right.
about my kingdom? And I know it's easy to say it's about God's kingdom, but
Yeah,
when
right
you actually
answer.
have to wrestle with it, you go, well, can it be both? I'd kind of like it to be, like God can stamp it, but I'd like it to be like Tyler did this. That would
I like
be
to at least get the credit for building your kingdom.
exactly, yeah. So I think there's some of it to wrestle with. So, but it's not all. There are struggles, and they're absolutely real. But what are some of the joys that y'all have had now that you're kind of out? So you transition fully outside of a legacy or traditional church or whatever we want to call it.
Yep.
What are some of the joys that y'all have now of this journey?
So many. You want to go? Want me to go?
I mean, I think one of the overarching feelings or benefits that we have is just freedom.
Yes.
It's just freedom to listen to Jesus and then to do what he's asking us to do, specifically in our context with the people who are right in front of us. I think another joy is just our connection as family. We feel connected in relationship to our boys and to each other in a way that was not present when we were part of a church. And it's not that the church's fault, it's just all of the things that came with that, just from being able to spend the time on that that's really necessary to build those connections with each other. And we have, I think another benefit of it actually is over the journey of having so many people into our home and doing it poorly a lot of the time. I think one of the benefits that came from that is, for me, I learned how to love people that were very different from me because they were in my home. And some of that was very challenging for me, but I do think over time, the Lord has given me eyes to see people and to love them for who they are rather than trying to change them into who I thought they should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our kids have learned how to interact with a wide variety of people, backgrounds, ages, and that's something that they consistently are able to do, is just interact with a wide variety of people. And I think that has been a benefit too.
I like freedom. I've had people that maybe I haven't seen in a while that I'll see, and they're like, wow, you just seem so free. You're just walking in a lot of freedom. You're just walking in a lot of joy, a lot of peace. It's like, look, because I am. Like, this is incredible. And that's been a process, right? Because I think sometimes in the DMM world, you can just replace one set of burdens and expectations for another. And I did. And but just the freedom of saying, I'm just gonna walk in this intimacy with Jesus and respond accordingly. And one of the ways it's happened, even locally, so we're in Southwest Michigan, off the road. We came off the road with my mom for a year, and are renting a house pretty close to where she's at. But it's an area I grew up in, but not the area we were living at in Michigan. And so it's a new area. And so like learning to meet new people, starting a group here in this area, just slowly. But what I've realized is when you are not a pastor and you've not been known to these as a pastor, actually, that's what I think happens is fireworks. I got careful with my hands, and I got to turn that thing off, right? The reactions, turn them off. Okay, so you can just be friends with people. Sometimes when you're a pastor or ministry leader, there's these expectations that are placed on you, and you have of them because of a role. And like the joy of just getting to be friends with people without the weird baggage of being how does it work with being a pastor for them, and they pay you for this, and like they have expectations because of it. It's been such a joy of just learning to be friends with people with not an agenda to get them to fit my vision or something, but just to simply say, to spur them on in the Lord and to love people well. So that's been, so fun.
Amen. Amen. I love that. I love that so much. And so because I have you'll have a unique perspective here. I would love for you to speak to anybody on the call, whether they're a pastor or ministry leader, but pretty much everybody here on the call would be in Britton's shoes, right? They would be the ones that are hearing it and they're going. And then what would you say to anybody that is hearing this and now they've got to go tell their spouse? And I see Brian actually has Katie right next to him. And so good job, Brian. Yeah, right next to her. But they now have to take this stuff and they're like so excited about it. What is a way that you could involve, and maybe they're going to still stay, they're not leaving,
Sure.
they're a pastor, they're not leaving tomorrow. How can they involve their family, their spouse in this? What's a step that would have been helpful?
I mean, I think just from my perspective, what would have felt helpful is just to be able to have real, honest conversations, to be able to identify the things that are challenging, things that feel like barriers, and for that not to be taken as a direct threat to the ministry that's happening, but just can we just air these things that feel challenging and have an honest conversation about it? And we just didn't know how to do that. We needed some extra tools and skills to help us to be able to do that well.
I would also add, I think to remember in this world, why we get really excited is we hear about a new wineskin, a new container for the church. And it finally makes sense. It finally fits a lot. It fills in the blanks. It's got so much more potential. And it's so good. But the point of the parable of the new wine and the wineskins is to contain the new wine, is to enjoy the new wine. And I think I held too tightly to the wineskin and neglected the joy of the new wine, which is this intimate, joy-filled connection with Jesus and one another. And I think to start there and start expressing my heart to Michelle better of like what I long for is to like walk in more freedom and to see more people empowered and to like not be so dependent upon me. And like I want people to desperately connect with Jesus, to hear his voice, to not come to me and say, what's Jesus saying? All the heart of the essence of enjoying the new wine. And then say, here's a way that I'm learning that I'd love to explore with you what that might look like, rather than, oh, this is, we got to make disciples. Here's, we got to start these leadership cells, and we're going to host it in our house, and you're going to cook dinner for these people. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get all these groups going, and then they're going to start other groups, and then we're going to have a movement of disciple making groups throughout our city in 6, she's like, what do I didn't slow down. I went so far ahead and didn't get to the essence and let her ask questions and have a conversation about that. And I think it would have been a lot different had I slowed down and not be in such a hurry. I get the urgency and the excitement, but I was hurried. And Jesus just wasn't hurried when he was around. And so to go at the pace that my wife and kids needed would have been way better for me than rather than going at my pace.
And without me feeling like my pace or questions was wrong or bad or slowing him down, because that was very much what I felt, was that what we needed was very different from what he needed. And so how do we reconcile those two? They can't both coexist. And so
my last encouragement would be to those, you on this call is, as much as possible, slow down and go at the pace of your spouse. I get the urgency and I get the excitement, but it's just not, honestly, it's not worth it. If you're dragging your spouse, or you're doing it and they're resenting you for it. It just, of all the people we've worked with, it just doesn't work long term. it's okay to go slow and reset things in your own home. I think about even the Israelites. They left Egypt, and before they got the promised land, they're in the wilderness. Now, their disobedience caused it to last longer than it needed to be. But even so, like, it's okay to go through that time of the in between and the waiting and resetting things in your own home and your own family. And I get that even when I say that, that doesn't guarantee that your spouse and you're gonna be on the same page and they're gonna be just as passionate. I'm not saying there's guarantees, but to at least go slow so that your spouse feels like they are more important than some vision that you have. Because if you don't, they're gonna resent that. And what it models for other people is that uh, purpose is more important than the people, and I think people are just more important. I think that's what Jesus modeled. So it's okay to go slow, and you're going to build on a healthier foundation then anyway.
That's gold. That's gold. Good stuff. Okay, I asked a lot of questions. I want to open it up to the group. Let's do some Q&A for about 10-ish minutes. Any questions anybody has, just unmute and share.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Rich.
You mentioned, Britton, that you moved from your head to your heart. I'd like to know how did that, how were you able to achieve to get there closer to your wife, her heart? What did you do? Exactly, how did that happen?
One, it was slow. Two was people that knew what they were doing that could walk with me in it. And in the most practical sense, it was just learning for me to slow down. I'm so go, 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 go. I had to slow down and really think, what am I feeling right now? And why am I feeling that? And then sharing that with my wife. And it sounds simple for a lot of you, that's natural. That was so foreign to me. And when I first started doing that, I would be like sweating profusely. I'm not even exaggerating. I was sweating at just been slowing down to acknowledge what am I feeling, why am I feeling that, and sharing that. And then I had to learn how to hear her share her feelings, especially when they were negative, and especially towards me and the things I was passionate about. To be more curious, to get to know her heart. My goal had to shift of convincing my wife to get on board with my vision to connecting with her heart. And that I'm not trying to say like, oh, that's an easy process. That's taken me 3 years to do that, Rich, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And it, but I'm convinced if the Lord can do that in me, he can do that in anybody. Anybody.
Yeah.
I think I'll add on to that too. I think there was just some unlearning that needed to happen in the sense of just I guess I'm speaking on your behalf, but like the belief system around emotions and how we feel, that like those are a waste of time. Kind of culturally, I think there's a belief that, and in the church world, I think there's a belief that those are a waste of time. They get in the way. Our emotions are completely faulty, therefore we should pay no attention to them. And so we've swung really far to one extreme of giving those no attention whatsoever. And I think we just had to unlearn some of those beliefs that we've picked up over time. Are they the totality? No, but they are a piece of being human and created in God's image. And we had to learn how to give those the attention that they need as a part of our human experience.
Yeah. I think men tend to be more in the head
For sure.
than women. And I really, what you said about focus on the wine rather than the wineskin, that is really impactful to me. And again, I guess I just say, how did you move from getting this vision into place, the different things, the discovery Bible studies and the like? How did you? What exactly did that look like? You just spent more time with Christ and just meditated, let Him speak, and that's pretty profound what you said there, and I can see where that would make a huge difference by just focusing on that relationship and getting intimate with Jesus, and how that could really be very powerful in seeing Jesus work and God work in your life and the life of the people that you're working with. That must have been that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the 10-second answer is, yeah, it was, again, I think the wineskin is really helpful, but it was
Yeah.
just focusing on the intimacy with Jesus, really
Mhm.
Yeah.
seeking
Mhm.
him and hearing his voice. It
Yeah.
was that. And it's still the challenge for me, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Amen.
Thanks.
Awesome. Jacob, I saw your hand first, and then we'll go to Cynthia. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on here and sharing and opening up to this. Something that you said kind of early on, it's practical, but it also connects to the marriage relationship and the family. So, I am in a church context right now, and so I'm trying to think of the way to say this. Uh, we're not like the most naturally relational culture just in general, the culture that we're in. And so there's lots of third spaces that people have just grown accustomed to meeting in. And so, like, let's say I'm meeting with people to talk through some of this, moving towards DMM. If somebody isn't, if somebody is not ready to bring a gathering into their home, if they're not unified in that, is kind of the thought in that, hey, you've got to do that. You've got to get on the same page of we are going to do this in our home first and foremost, because sometimes one spouse will be on, one won't. So there'll be the start to, well, hey, maybe we can do this. I can do this with some men over here or some women over here in a third space. And so I want to make sure that maybe you're experiencing that. So just speak to that. If we're not at a place to do this unified and doing this on our home, we shouldn't pursue this. Does that like that's the first step?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the ideal. I mean, again, that's not always the case. Sometimes, yeah, you go meet with men, whatever. But I think sometimes it's just taking a step back and making it even more simple than that. Rather than the first step being, we need to have a gathering with a bunch of people in our home. It's, hey, I want to learn how to like seek Jesus together as a family. And I just want to do this with us. So for us, like just us five. And when you get into the rhythm of doing that with just your own family, even if it's just you and one other person, you and your spouse doing that, that's the simplest expression of the church. Then it's like, okay, you're getting a taste for what could be, and then you can add others on to it. So I think sometimes we're asking for way too big of a step for people of like, I gotta have 15 people in my home versus let's just us do this for a season and just see what it's like and go from there.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Really good. It's really good. Cynthia, I see your hand.
Thank you for sharing everything that you've done today. This really is speaking well to me. And I am in a legacy church. We brought in a new pastor 2 years ago when our pastor retired, and he is full on DMM, and I'm so thankful for that. I want to know how to support the pastor and his family. And they have had 2 children in less than 2 years that they've been at the church. So, I mean, my heart goes out to our pastor's wife, and how can we best not infringe on their privacy, but how can we undergird them? Because they're not only pastoring a church, they're also spearheading the DMM portion in our locale and things too. So
I love the heart of that question. It's a great heart.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I think it's a beautiful heart, and it's not one that I experienced a lot of, and so I think it's a beautiful question that you're asking. I mean, I can think of many people over the years who I think tried to offer things like that to us, but it was devoid of relationship. And because of the nature of the system, I was naturally skeptical of people. And so That's my personality. I don't know that that is true of everyone, but I guess I would say, I think you could genuinely offer those sentiments to them and say, but I want to do that in a way that is genuine and supportive and helpful for you. And so if that means we have to build relationship with each other over a period of time before you feel safe letting me babysit your kids or coming into your home or whatever level of support it might be, and letting them be honest with you, because initially, I don't know what your connection is with them, but they may not be feel free to be fully honest or to ask for help or to be vulnerable. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is it might take some time to build the relationship to be able to actually live that out. But I think expressing what you just said would be a beautiful way to reach out to them and let them respond to that
Yeah.
how they want to.
Good.
That's so good.
Good.
That's so good. Cynthia, I might add to that, just one of the things that I think would be helpful is whatever way God has gifted you, I would look to serve them while asking nothing of them. So, for example, if you love to cook, just take something over and drop it off. Because we're talking about one of the ways that like you build relationships. One of the ways that people did that for me is whenever they did things for me and didn't ask for things in return. They just gave it. And they didn't ask me if I wanted it. They just dropped it. And so like there was that. And then so I can think of some people early on that would just pray for me. They wouldn't call me and ask me and want me to like tell them, deep dark secrets. They would just send out like written. I can remember this one lady, she would send me written prayers for me. And so it just like one of the ways that I grew to trust them was because they served me and knew they cared beyond wanting something from me. So that might be something just to think about, Cynthia, is how you can do that. And we'll have one last question, and then we want to, so Britton and Michelle, y'all start thinking about it. We're going to pray for y'all on how we can pray for y'all. So, and go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for being so transparent and vulnerable. And clearly you're able to do this because you are in a much healthier place. You certainly talked about how the family trip and travels was so key to bringing you all together. But I did wonder if there wasn't something more. And Michelle, I think you alluded to we needed extra tools and skills. And I wondered if you could just briefly, to the extent you're comfortable, share about what that looked like. I think, Britton, you said, some other people walking alongside you. Maybe that's part of it. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So in 2021, we had some generous people send us to an organization called Alongside, which is in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they exist to come alongside missionaries and people in ministry who have experienced pretty tough things. And they are all licensed therapists who have either been in ministry or in missionary work themselves. And so we had therapy every day, 5 days a week, with licensed therapists who understand the impact of ministry. And our kids were part of that with us. So we actually lived there for 3 weeks. And that, I think, was a very significant turning point for us being able to verbalize that things were not healthy and they needed some attention. Since that point in time, I would say some of the tools that we have been really learning and implementing and then walking alongside other people is from an organization called Thrive Today. And they specifically help people with some of these relational and emotional skills through a perspective of Jesus and the Word that just help us be able to identify and verbalize and have conversations around those things that we maybe just haven't learned how to do, and that on the whole the church does not do well, and that we've just really pressed into spending time in learning those things.
Yeah, I mean, we understand not everyone can sell their house and go on the road for 8 months. And not everyone can go to a place for 3 weeks to get this kind of care. I mean, we're just very grateful to the Lord. But Michelle, these books that we talk on, just connecting with those groups. Another one's called The Other Half of Church. It just gives a good framework for thinking through some of those things. that's been helpful for us to examine and really step into in people that have done this for a while, just friends, people that are further along in the journey. I mean, that's what disciple making is about, just finding someone that's further along the journey in this area or that area and be like, hey, you got to help me. And so that's what we've done, is ask people, and then we try to offer that to other people as well.
But I guess I would say, if there are more specifics that you have questions about or you want to have a further conversation, Tyler's got contact information. We're happy to have further conversations and talk about that if that's something that any of you would be interested in.
That's a great segue. That was like a professional segue, Michelle. Good job. In fact, I'm gonna post the link to it's Pastor to Pioneer. Great resource. He does a podcast. Every once in a while I go on there and I bring the quality of it way down, but so you'll have to just decipher through those. But